Hi, I'm Abby. I got new furniture. New furniture which I can put my records in. I have a lot of records, and this... How did he do it? And this is Vinyl Monday. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the who, what, when, where, why, and how do I feel about classic albums in my collection. If TV show length episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as TikTok. So how are we doing? How are we feeling after this holiday weekend? Have we watched Elliot Roberts' Better Man video? Have we watched FD Signifier's Beyonce video? Have we heard Taylor Swift bought back the rights to all her music? I'm not even the biggest Swiftie on the planet, but that's a huge step forward for artists' ownership of their work. That's genuinely really cool. Lots of stuff happening as of late, including a new Dolls Pod episode. Emma has written this one for us about Sherry Curry. Runaway, actress, chainsaw carver. That makes so much sense for her. This is our first episode which ventures this far into the 1970s side of the Unveiling the Legends Dolls of the 60s and 70s title. It really opens up the possibilities for the next season of the podcast. Yes, next season, Emma and I are taking an extra week between this episode and the next to prepare the last few episodes of the season. We think you're gonna love it. The Dolls Pod is available wherever you stream your podcast, but as always, Apple and Spotify are linked in the description. On to this week's Vinyl Monday episode. Clearly I look like I've stuck my finger in a socket for a reason. I don't have very many opportunities to pull my natural hair out of the bag, but I figured this situation, the denim shirt, brown corduroy pants, and little suede moccasin boots would be the perfect homage to this week's artist. And that artist is Tim Buckley with Goodbye and Hello. Congrats if you guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my post tab. That's where I post the hints to what the next album is gonna be. I make announcements, I host polls, you can find all of that on my channel. And if you so choose, you can always read the written versions of my reviews on my website, linked in the description. Alright, let's take the plastic off. Stuck there. So my copy is a very early repress. It's on the gold Electra labels. This is the Unipack sleeve, all features that the original had. I think I got this for my birthday 3 years ago. I know it was in my first vinyl haul. Now let's talk about this cover art. The Goodbye and Hello cover was shot by Guy Webster. I always thought this ring in Tim's eye was makeup. It was actually a bottle cap he found. As stated by his girlfriend at the time, Janie, quote, "Tim told me it didn't mean shit." They were on the beach for the photo shoot, and Tim picked up a bottle cap and stuck it in his eye. A pop bottle top. That's all it was. Opening up the gatefold, we have photography by David Gates, with liner notes by the co-lyricist on this record, Larry Beckett. If you look at the first letter of each line, it spells, "I love Tracy." Yes, Larry used his friend's album to try and win his ex-girlfriend back. He also used several of the songs he wrote for Tim to try and win her back. No, none of them worked. Tracy, whoever you are stronger than me. If a man had written Song to the Siren for me, I would have caved like a house of cards. On Goodbye and Hello, we of course have the man of the hour, Tim Buckley, on lead vocals, guitar, slide, vibraphone, and as principal songwriter. He is co-writing, though, with Larry Beckett. He contributes backing vocals to Morning Glory as well. Our band is made up of Lee Underwood on lead guitar, John Forsha and Brian Hartzler, also on guitar, Jerry Yester playing piano, organ, and harmonium, Don Randy on keys, yes, this is a Wrecking Crew album, Jim Fielder on bass, Jim Gordon and Eddie Ho on drums, and Jimmy Bond on double bass. A lot of Jims on this record. Rounding out the ensemble is Carter C.C. Collins on congas and other percussion. Our special guests include Dave Guard of the Kingston Trio on kalimba and tambourine, and Henry Diltz playing harmonica on Once I Was. It's kind of weird to mention his name not in the context best of photography, but he was in a band with Jerry Yester. Goodbye and Hello was produced by Jerry Yester and Jack Holtzman with arrangements by Joshua Rifkin. Roll transition. From the jump, it was clear Tim Buckley was going to be something special. Early exposure to jazz music and the female singers of the 1940s cultivated his androgynous voice, his frankly insane vocal range, and unique approach to melody. He started with folk ensembles in his high school years, but that was just never going to be his end goal. He dropped out of college after a week because he wasn't allowed to advance right to the high-level music classes, which is the most Tim Buckley thing I have ever heard. Elektra Records snapped 19-year-old Tim right up in tandem with a band out in LA. Just a little group, you might have heard of them. Tim's first album, released in 1966, didn't sell well. Pretty dime a dozen, even dated. Nevertheless, Elektra financed him to go back and forth from California to New York quite often. Tim got the best of both worlds out of this gig. Sunshiny folk pop from the West Coast, and the serious stuff dressed in black on the East. He met Leonard Cohen and opened for Nico. There he met his lead guitarist, Lee Underwood. This unit of Tim, his high school friends Larry and Jim, and Lee helped shape what Goodbye and Hello would be. Tim wrote half of Goodbye and Hello there in New York, taking LSD to expand his mind. He worked with Larry for No Man Can Find the War, Hallucinations, Knight Errant, the title track, and Morning Glory. That year, Tim also filmed a segment for Leonard Bernstein's Inside the Pop Rock Revolution special.
What these young people seem to say is that their music isn't just decorative.
Is the war inside your mind?
Later that year, he debuted Hallucination at Bard College with Donald Fagen, Chevy Chase, and Carter Collins backing him up. After this New York trip, Tim chose to move forward with just Carter. Surprise, surprise. Tim's manager, Herbie Cohen, calls up Jerry Yester of the Modern Folk Quartet. Jerry was pretty green to production. The green plants are always the most pliable. This made him a perfect match to Tim, who had all these really ambitious ideas for what his album was going to be. He was influenced by some of the biggest records of the year before, namely Pet Sounds and Revolver. Donovan and Jefferson Airplane were also on his radar. Tim wanted this big open production, lots of free space for reverb to go in, lots of bells and whistles, and a psychedelic sound. Tim and Larry had all this material, they knew what they wanted it to sound like, and they even had the running order laid out. They wanted social commentary songs, No Man Can Find the War, and Once I Was, to open each side of the LP. Before moving forward with all of this, Elektra exec Jack Holtzman needed a single, not an 8-minute title track or whatever a phantasmagoria is.
You like D&D, Audrey Hepburn, Fangoria.
In response to this prompt, Tim and Larry came up with Once Upon a Time, which Elektra proceeded to not issue as a single because, thus, Goodbye and Hello sessions began in May of 1967 at Western Recorders in LA. Jerry picked the studio because the Beach Boys had just used it for some of the components of Good Vibrations. Thanks to Tim's connections to the Zappaverse, they were also able to record at one of Frank's go-to's, Whitney Studio. It was once a Mormon church. They didn't have a pipe organ, but they had this crazy-looking thing, and that's close enough. The track listing of Goodbye and Hello goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have No Man Can Find the War, followed by Carnival Song, then Pleasant Street, next Hallucinations, and side 1 closes with I Never Asked to Be Your Mountain. Opening up side 2, we have Once I Was, followed by Phantasmagoria in 2, next Knight Errant, then the title track Goodbye and Hello, and the album closes with Morning Glory, also known as The Hobo. Goodbye and Hello was released in July of 1967 amidst a very, very, very active musical space. Didn't make that much of a splash, but it was enough to give Tim a loyal fan base. By this time, he was headlining the Troubadour and opening for Jimi Hendrix. Out in New York, he played Carnegie Hall as part of a hootenanny hosted by one of his musical heroes, Pete Seeger. Upon Goodbye and Hello's release, Elektra shelled out $1,100 a month in 1967 money, by the way, for a big billboard on the Sunset Strip. There are photos of the Doors billboard out there. There are photos of Loves from that same summer. For whatever reason, I can't find photos of Tim's. Jack Holtzman loved Goodbye and Hello and threw all his weight behind Tim, until he let it slip that Jack took LSD. Then Tim appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. He got fed up with guest host Alan King and called him, and I quote, a piece of cardboard. It was a valuable learning lesson for Tim to speak up. I found I couldn't use many interviews at all from this era for this episode because Tim was just so timid in them. But still, Jack really wasn't happy with the cardboard comment. Morning Glory, often retitled The Hobo, was covered by Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Chrissie Hynde,
He had come to wound my door and jeer.
The Fairport Convention never recorded it, but it's popped up on their bootlegs. The most famous cover, though, is by the Stone Ponies, featuring Linda Ronstadt.
Tell me stories I call to the hobo.
Released on the Volume 3 album, if you turn it around to the back cover, you might be able to spot Tim and Janie. After this, Tim cared less and less about commercial success, in turn falling out of favor with Elektra. After Goodbye and Hello's follow-up, Happy Sad, he jumped ship for a label that would better indulge his artistic changes. Many, many years after Goodbye and Hello, Tim's own son grew up to be a singer. You might have heard of him, I don't know, it's kind of a long shot. Only one of the greatest singers of all time, who recorded one of the greatest albums of all time, which features the greatest cover of all time. Like most in my generation, I discovered Son before Father. My relationship with Tim's music, though, is a lot lighter than my relationship with Jeff's. I don't know how it was during Jeff's lifetime, you know, when Grace was in the rollout stages, but I know when you click on his Spotify page, Tim is mentioned in the first sentence of his bio. Father and son's legacies cast long shadows on each other, though one absolutely grew to eclipse the other in stature. Now, Jeff's first public performance under the name Jeff Buckley was at a tribute concert for his father in 1991. He chose to sing 2 songs off Goodbye and Hello, Once I Was and I Never Asked to Be Your Mountain. We will get to this later. What do I think of Goodbye and Hello? In his book, Lee Underwood identifies that Tim went through 5 distinct phases in his career lasting just 10 years. Folk, psychedelic, jazz/sophista pop, avant-garde, and whatever sex funk is. Wait, I might have one of those records. Hold on. I do have one of those later records. Greetings from LA. Now, I do like the occasional odd album, but I don't know how good of an idea it would be to just start with Star Sailor, so I figured Goodbye and Hello would be a more appropriate place to start for this channel's focus. This period of Tim's career plays right into my taste for psychedelic folk. See, my longtime patronage of Donovan, it makes so much sense that Tim was listening to Donovan at this time. What draws me to Goodbye and Hello? Firstly, the massive production, the strings, sound effects, all manners of instruments, including harmonium. Nico really did ruin my perception of that instrument, but we are redeeming it. I also really appreciate the creative use of percussion and reverb on reverb on reverb. That reverb gives I just said reverb so much in that sentence. It gives Tim's voice the space to do some frankly stupid things. You mean this man can sing things most women can't? His greatest asset was his voice. Androgynous, nimble, and pure. Oh my god. He's wearing necklaces in that. Oh, now. This is a fuller homage to Tim. Anyway, where was I? Oh my god. Son of a bitch. I'm also fascinated by Tim's guitar playing style. He didn't do the open tunings thing like a lot of people think he did, but he also didn't use many crazy chords. Why? Because he couldn't. He broke his hand in high school. Tim told differing stories about this and, frankly, everything else in his life. As put by Lee, he was a, quote, whimsically creative inventor. The album opens with a nuclear blast, beginning Goodbye and Hello's most explicit protest song, No Man Can Find the War. The sound effects on this album were pulled from Elektra's library. Larry's lyrics tell a story in snapshots, like newsreels would. Photographs of guns and flame, bayonet and jungle grin, lookouts tremble on the shore. It's all spliced together with the psychological, urging you to not just observe this chaos, but really imagine it. Tape recorder echoes scream, orders fly like bullets stream, drums and cannons laugh aloud. This song is marked by the war's physical absence, but psychological presence. Larry said this song was about bystanders idly watching war on their televisions. Lee likened it to the old adage, if your mind is on fire, the rest of your world is on fire. I thought of the Cold War. Constant threat of nuclear annihilation and a whole lot of propaganda. Is the war across the sea? Is the war behind the sky? Is the war inside your mind? Carnival begins with Dave Guard's Kalimba and more pulls from the Elektra Sound Library. If you listen really hard, you can hear Take Me Out to the Ball Game in the verses. For one brilliant moment, as Tim begins to sing, the carnival music pulls away from the key Tim and the guys are in, adding stomach-churning tension like being flipped upside down on a fair ride. The song is a marionette puppet waltz, jerky and loose-jointed, and the arrangement illustrates a fair, the clangs of the rides, big top keys made to sound like organ or accordion. All these sounds layer at the end into a disorienting collage, not unlike a funhouse mirror warps your perception. It's very reminiscent of another big top song from that same summer. Tim sings abstract lyrics of the down-and-out characters carnivals bring out of the shadows. The nighttime comes to bring the bums from Bowery Street to crimson streets of wine. Kids don't know to pity or fear these people, they're just part of the scene. Your children smile in single file, they learn mistakes that others make. They see, although they cannot know, the needs they'll need to have their greed grow wild. This is the first time Tim gets to show off that insane falsetto, like a skilled tightrope walker under a big top. Goodbye and Hello starts to come more into focus on Pleasant Street. It's definitely about a drug, but no one seems to agree what drug it was. Jerry Yester insisted it was heroin, speed was an option. I personally think it's LSD. This whole album is weed and LSD. The narrator lives a double life, between the straight people wearing suits, or as Tim calls them, Christian licorice clothes, and the Pleasant Street kids chasing oblivion, down, down, down. One can imagine how Tim might have related to this song. He spent his high school years piling into cars and making the hour drive to hang out on the Sunset Strip. Pleasant Street is insistent, driven by piano and fuzzed out guitars. The organ lifts the song up while the forever descending chord progression pulls down, creating a big space for Tim to do acrobat tricks in. Pleasant Street displays Tim's keen understanding of phrasing and pacing. He always leaves room to do more. He paced very well. He won't give it all to the first verse or chorus. He'll tumble out of a verse breathless or drop the note at the end of a line so he can make it back to a mumble, then build it all back up to full volume again. You'd think Hallucinations would be the song about LSD LSD, but no, it's about a breakup Larry was going through. The hallucinations Tim speaks of are of this girl. I felt you breathing as you fell asleep. When I reached to touch you, no one was there and the night was deep. This love burned too fast and too hot. The candle died, now you are gone, for the flame was too bright. The song begins woozy, but gradually comes to the swaying groove set by the bass. It's as if coming upon a sweet oasis in the middle of a desert night. Carter Collins finally gets to take center stage. He was integral to Goodbye and Hello's sound. Congas mingle with kalimba and are dipped in reverb to create ethereal waterfalls of percussion. You know I am a sucker for textural recordings like this. They say limitation breeds innovation, and the guitars on Hallucinations lead me to believe that Tim wanted a sitar on this song, but none of his buddies could play one. It sounds like the strings are being detuned as they play to create those impossible dips a sitar would. Again, it makes so much sense that Tim was listening to Donovan. Sunshine Superman came out the year before and has sitar on almost every track. There are lots of little Donovan-esque moments happening on Goodbye and Hello, especially on the song Hallucinations. I think that's my favorite Tim Buckley song. It's that East meets West sound that was taking shape in the end of 1965 through 66. There's flourishes of electric guitar, it all whirls together, making it hard to separate what's what. Tim's jazz influence shines through on those tricky syncopated lines. His voice is soft and lilting, intimate, like a little candle flame on the edge of being burnt out. You just want to cup your hands around it to shield it from the wind or hear it right in your ear. Hallucinations is gorgeous. It's one of my favorite songs on the LP. It feels very Gabor Szabo Dreams. I think that's why I like it so much. But brace yourselves, listeners, for 3 of the greatest songs ever written all in a row. I Never Asked to Be Your Mountain, Once I Was, and Phantasmagoria in 2. If they were all on the same side of the LP, they'd be OP. About seeing him at the Troubadour, Pamela Des Barres said, quote, "He was so inspiring and so cute. He had a real tenderness and vulnerability. You just wanted to hold him and comfort him." Lee said, quote, "Back in those days, Tim had a way of doing a passive little boy poet thing that thrilled the girls. They yearned to cuddle him, hold him, protect him. He loved it, but he also had a mind as quick as a cobra. He could be lethal." Ralph Beckett said, quote, "A lot of Tim's power over women was his vulnerability, projecting a sense of weakness. They felt they could mother him, help him, elevate him, set him on the right path, help him fulfill his purpose. He was great looking. Curly-haired singer-songwriter. Gimme a break." On any given upload, 88 to 90% of my viewer base is men. To those men, this is the female gaze. The guy who wanders around wearing the same clothes as yesterday, but he's so talented and just so cute that his unkempt looks aren't slovenly. Tim's persona was worldly, romantic, non-threatening. Hell, I'm taller than he was. And whimsical. He feels safe to us, and I'll say it, he's a tragic figure. A woman looks at a guy like Tim Buckley and easily convinces herself, "Oh, I can fix him." Not so much my type, but I understand the appeal. You know who else had this aura and still has a legion of young female fans? Syd Barrett. Just like reading hundreds of pages about Syd Barrett, reading these biographies on Tim, I learned he could be such a jerk. But he got away with it because he was ungodly talented and women found him pretty. This way about him, this non-threatening air, is no doubt part of I Never Asked to Be Your Mountain's appeal. Rounding out side 1, it's the biggest of the big. Jerry Esther really said, what if I did what Phil Spector did but with folk? I know there's bass somewhere in there. There's 6-string guitars, on 12-string guitars, on congas, on drums, on kalimba, on harmonium. I say tracks because there's gotta be multiple of each. I doubt there's just one. It makes for a chaotic symphony which Tim can spew venom over. If you look at the lyrics, I Never Asked to Be Your Mountain is mean as hell. So, I've deliberately left out a pretty big chapter of Tim's life until now because it's more relevant to this specific song than anywhere else. In 1965, Tim married his high school sweetheart, in part so she could escape her home situation, in part because she was pregnant. Or so she thought she was. Then she was actually pregnant, and Tim said, "Oh shit, I have nothing in common with this girl," and he split. Tim said to one of his friends that he felt like he'd been coerced into this marriage. Again, Tim told some tall tales, so we'll never truly know. He had Janie on the side, don't forget that. She had a lot less real-life responsibilities, like, I don't know, a child. And he'd just landed his deal with Elektra. Lee Underwood said, quote, "Tim left, not because he didn't care about his soon-to-be-born child, but because his musical life was just beginning, and, in addition, he couldn't stand Mary, his wife. He did not abandon Jeff, he abandoned Mary. The flying Pisces sails for time and tells me of my child. Later, the flying fish. Pisces is the sign of the fish. Mary was a Pisces. There is no doubt in my mind that Tim wrote this about his ex-wife. The root of the song states he felt both smothered and put on a pedestal. I never asked to be your mountain, I never asked to fly. Tim paints Mary as bitter, imagining all the things she says about him to Jeff. She says your scoundrel father flies with a dancer called a queen. Janie was a go-go dancer, and with her stolen cards he plays and laughs but never wins. We saw that same gambling imagery used to represent cheating in that song about the Midway. Maybe Mary had a right to be bitter. She was 16 years old, a promising musician herself, but had to drop out of high school because they didn't allow pregnant students. And as a single mom, she never had enough money to stay in one place for too long, so she had to uproot Jeff over and over again from any stability he found. Tim then imagines Jeff now being Mary's pillar to lean on. He never asked to be her mountain, he never asked to fly, and through his eye he comes his love and tells her not to cry. Amidst all of that, for a moment, Tim pleads for Mary to hear him out. "Oh, flying, flying fish, please flutter to my door." Even if he's not being entirely forthcoming. Yes, you can drink my lies if first you read my eyes. They officially call things off. I can't swim your waters and you can't walk my lands. In doing so, Tim is vindicated. I'm sailing all my sins and I'm climbing all my fears, and soon now I'll fly. He throws his voice up to the rafters on Fly. His pristine voice cracks. With the treatment on his vocals, it sounds like he's falling. Icarus has flown too close to the sun. With the bite Tim sings the choruses with, the tremendous vibrato, buried moans, and rapturous "oh please," it's almost manic. "I never asked to be your mountain" is ultimate catharsis, but it comes at a cost. I can't talk about this song without talking about Jeff's performance. He took his father's lyrics and turned them right back around on him. And all of the people who were hailing Jeff as the second coming of Christ just because he was Tim Buckley's son. As a whole, I don't think father and son sound alike. Jeff was much more influenced by rock and roll singers, Robert Plant, Morrissey. He said it himself, quote, "We were born with the same parts, but I sing like me, except for this." That was a choice to sound like Tim. As a child who grew up bearing the weight of a distant, fraught relationship with her own father, and am saddled with many physical, personal, and vocal similarities to him, I felt that note choice deep in my soul. I know exactly what Jeff was saying by doing that. On to the second side of the album with Once I Was. I was surprised to learn that this is supposed to be another anti-war song because it feels a lot more like a wistful song of lost love. The narrator yearns to return to a past life as a hunter, a lover, anyone besides the one he's in the trenches, the steppe, the jungle, or the desert. Henry Diltz's harmonica invokes the image of the lonely cowboy, wandering endlessly with a guitar strapped to his back. This soldier imagines his fate. His lady gets impatient for him to return and leaves. And soon there'll be another to tell you I was just a lie. Later, and though you have forgotten all of our rubbish dreams, I find myself searching through the ashes of our ruins. She's all he has to think about. Sometimes I wonder, just for a while, will you remember me? That's a low-key reference to Fred Neil's song Dolphins, which Tim would later cover. Tim's gorgeous vibrato is on full display on Once I Was. It was like bird's wings, so soft and fragile. He wouldn't ever let his voice go anemic. He matched up with the booming drums, yet he was careful not to overpower the delicate instruments, like the 12-string guitar. Hearing Tim sing is like watching a tightrope act that's also the Romeo and Juliet balcony scene. In fact, that is the exact appeal of a Tim Buckley ballad. You imagine this lonely guy with his hands in his pockets, kicking rocks as he drags his feet until he sees you. And he's so overcome with love at first sight that this impossibly beautiful voice comes out. But then he has to leave. He will sing you his 10 tales and then wander till spring. For 3 minutes and change, though, you are the center of Tim Buckley's world. He could make you believe every word he sang, even if someone else wrote them. Phantasmagoria is another fantastic performance. No pun intended. He spends pretty much the whole song in his falsetto. Goodbye and Hello's best songs all have him in common. If the lyrics pertain to love and the arrangements do him justice, it's sure to be a winner. Phantasmagoria's feathery, swirling instrumentation complements Tim's airy voice. Limber, skilled work by Lee, moody piano, and playful tambourine, they all link together. The song is about two lovers, Phantasmagoria in 2, unable to reconcile. I plainly see that our parts have changed, our sands are shifting around. Need I beg to you for one more day to find our lonely love. Knight Errant is a 2-minute ditty about, well, it disguises salacious subject matter with a super done-up mid-century medieval-inspired arrangement and Tim going full medieval troubadour, to the point where it's comical. Oh, where has my lady wandered? Yeah, this coy, cutesy cover-up method doesn't last for much longer. Next is the title track, another Larry Penn tune, his grand statement on the steep generational divide between boomers and their parents. This gap only got wider as America got more and more involved in the Vietnam War through the late 60s. Freedom and violence, the acrobat clowns do a balancing act on the graves of our sons while the tap-dancing emperor sings war is peace. Half the song is from the parents' generation, weighted by grandiose brass. The other half is from the child's point of view and is a little more naturalistic. The parent verses are uber dramatic. Tag yourself, I'm a godless, sexless, directionless loon. According to Dream Brother, most of the studio time was used to assemble this song. They spent a lot of money making it. I don't know if that worked. Not even Tim liked the song. Herbie Cohen made him and the rest of his trio, Lee and Carter, memorize it and play it in full once at the Garrick Theater, and Tim never played it again. There's good stuff in here. The solo violin part is great. I think there's a bass clarinet in there. I'll give credit where credit is due. Goodbye and Hello is totally original. But the end product is unfocused, overblown, and overdone. This does not have to be almost 9 minutes long. The concept might have come across better had it been slightly shorter, say 6 minutes. What could some of that runtime have gone to? Song to the Siren! Not putting the May 1967 recording of Siren on Goodbye and Hello, or at the very least not putting it out as a non-album single, was perhaps the greatest mistake of Tim Buckley's career. Or maybe it was made to stay in the vault until the end of the millennium. Who knows? In any way, we got an almost 9-minute title track instead. It almost works, but not quite. The album closes with Morning Glory. Tim asked Larry to write about a hobo. He never said why, but as the story goes, Tim's childhood home wasn't far from a camp of homeless people. The instrumental is breathtaking. The flutes, the haunting choir invokes images of a church, one of the last sanctuaries in this world. I was amazed to learn this choir was just Tim and Larry's voices. Reading through Morning Glory's lyrics, I don't think it's about a hobo, about a homeless person, so much as I think it's about a crisis of faith. I lit my purest candle close to my window, hoping it would catch the eye of any vagabond who passed it by. People light candles to send up a prayer, or invoke a saint. Let me see. There we go. Several saints spent their lives wandering. Transience is worked into many stories from the Bible, or exile as a life path or punishment. The idea of sanctuary, too, the fleeting house, has been around as long as humans have been persecuting each other. This narrator is clearly going through something. When they ask for stories, or an answer for their pain, the hobo replies, "Don't ask me how to wash away the grime. I can't come in, it's just too high a climb." "Then you be damned," I screamed to the hobo. "Turn into stone," I wept to the hobo. "Leave me alone," I knelt to the hobo. But he walked away from my fleeting house. I didn't grow up in the church. I have pretty vague ideas of spirituality, if you've been around here for long. Faith, though, is more than simply inviting a god into your life. It's unconditional devotion, even when the path isn't always clear, or you felt like you've been betrayed. This is the narrator's reaction to feeling forsaken by God, but again, this is just my interpretation. Tim was never thrilled with his first album. It was too run-of-the-mill for him. There was no real concept to expand upon. It was a collection of songs, and that's that. It's a collection of good songs, don't get me wrong, but aside from that unmistakable voice singing them, there's nothing that makes that self-titled record distinctly Tim Buckley. Goodbye and Hello is the introduction to what made Tim Tim. Jerry Yester formed a solid group to back him. This ensemble sensibility would play to Tim's hand moving forward. He's showing off one of his greatest assets, his voice. The material he wrote with Larry used this asset to its greatest effect. It invoked Tim's other great strength, his ability to connect. He can yearn, he can pine, he can sigh just as well as he can cry out or lash out. He's reaching for you here, and he's reaching for something bigger here. This is a psychedelic statement piece influenced by all of the biggest albums of the year before. For other folk artists of the time, an album like Goodbye and Hello would be the summation of what they could do. For Tim, though, it was just one stop on his journey. Keep in mind, he was just 20 years old when this came out. He's pulling back the arrow to shoot for something far beyond singer-songwriter. Where that arrow would land, nobody in 1967 could have guessed.
Your movement you savor.
Right here was a sweet spot for sure. It's just opulent enough to fit in with its time, but with a heartfelt, forlorn, intimate, and raw core that often got lost in other psychedelic works. Popular music may have waved goodbye to those acid-era elements within the year, but this album is a proper hello to Tim Buckley, the artist. Adventurous for sure, sensitive when he wanted to be, completely singular. I almost reached for the prayer candle to drink. I don't want to do that. My personal favorites off this one are Hallucinations, I Never Asked to Be Your Mountain, Once I Was, Phantasmagoria, and Morning Glory. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all of the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that's it! That is the introduction of Tim Buckley to the Vinyl Monday canon. That was Goodbye and Hello. If I had, like, a shred of musical talent, I would release a covers album. I just think that's such a fun project, and it would be half Tim Buckley, half Harry Nilsson. Totally different brands of emotional devastation, an homage to two multifaceted performers who I love. But enough of what I think. What do you think of this album? What do you think of Tim Buckley? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love. And remember, despite what some guy on the internet says, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday, Monday mornings at 11, and a new Dolls Pod every other Friday at noon, except for this week. We are taking an extra week. Remember to prepare the last episodes of the season. Thank you so much for watching. Whew, it's always a mouthful, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!